Hello everyone. In this video I just want to give a few tips and tricks for when it comes to revising for exams. Now I've had a few requests for this kind of video and it's quite difficult to do because there's no real solid kind of advice you can give one person over another. So these are very kind of general tips that I've given over the years that I've been teaching. One of my past students said to me, could I just pick up random questions and go through certain answers? And there is merit to doing that. But often on the actual day, on the exam that you get, it's so random what questions they could ask you that I've personally not found very useful, and the students that I've taught have said that doesn't overly help. So here are just, I think, 10 quick things that I advise my classes to do, and I found from feedback that I've had that they are fairly useful. So let's start at the top. So the first one is to make connections between topics. For example, and this one specifically works well for Key Stage 5. I mean, this is really a sort of GCSE A-Level kind of video. Make connections between the topics. For example, and I'll think about biology for this one because it was a biology exam that really triggered this, me making this. Lignin, for example, you find within a xylem to support it and prevent collapse. You also have C rings of cartilage along the trachea that also prevent collapse. And what we're doing there is linking something from plant structure to lung structure, which are two separate topics. But if you can find those connections between things like support, so the C rings and lignin both provide a support mechanism for the structures they're in. Finding the connections between different topics from different areas of the syllabus will allow you to kind of draw on that knowledge. So that's one thing I'd definitely recommend to do. Secondly, work off a mini list. Now, in each unit that you do, specifically at Key Stage 5, there's different modules, and each module has different titles. There's loads of different topics. So, for example, one would be on cells, microscopes, cell structure, biochemistry, any kind of list. I always say at the beginning of an exam, take just 1 minute and write down some mini subheadings in the corner of the paper. Some subheadings that represent the key topics in that particular exam. Because then what you can do is just simply refer back to that list, and no matter how random the question seems, no matter how odd or out of context it seems, it will always be based on one of those topics that you've listed. So that's quite a nice thing to do. Plus, it really helps the students that I've had that are more panicky. Let's say they've preferred that because they always think that they approach a question, think where's this come from? Have you ever learnt this? And the answer is yes. It will always be based on one of those topics. So that mini list is quite a good thing to do. 3, I've got to ask yourself, what is the real life context? Why would they possibly be asking me this? So whenever you get given a question, always think, how does this apply in real life? For example, I to my own class taught oxygen dissociation curves and the Boer shift recently, and I gave them the S-shaped curve. I said to look at it, analyse it, and then I said, what if I do exercise and my body temperature goes up? How would that affect anything? Now, it's only when you consider really why, how, when, where oxygen may be delivered, only then can you take this sort of simple bit of lesson detail and give it some structure and give it some real life scenarios. So rather than just thinking about oxygen dissociation curves generally, we're actually thinking about its real life application and actually how the curve shifts when you exercise and when the temperature goes up. Like, do you get any kind of accommodating change? So try and give everything a real life context. My 4th one in the top right corner of the video is one I recommend probably more than any other. Skim over mark schemes. Now, I'm not saying to download every past paper and do every single question. You don't have to. But go through an exam paper, find particular questions, big questions that come up a lot. Find the equivalent mark scheme. And not necessarily rote learn the mark scheme, but just look at words that are bolded or underlined. Because usually it says in the answers that without those words you can't get the mark. So just learn what the bold words are or what the underlined words are. Know what those key trigger words are that would get you that credit. Equally, in a lot of the mark schemes and past papers it says do not credit this. And the more you get to look over mark schemes, the more you see what exam boards don't allow, it just allows you to familiarise yourself a bit more with how to approach a particular long answer question, for example. You know what to say, you know what not to say, and you know what words are really going to get you the marks. Number 5, I've got break down the big key terms. Now, one key term that I teach is myocardial infarction. Now, that's the proper scientific term for a heart attack. But if you break that word down, myo, Latin for muscle, cardia or cardiac refers to the heart, and an infarct is an area of cell death. So myocardial infarction, if you go it backwards, do it backwards in a way, is an area of cell death within the heart muscle. Now, if you can try to analyse words like that, it just gives you that greater level of understanding. You can understand where things come from. Equally, the word pulmonary means lung, or refers to things of lung in nature. So when you do about the pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, you straight away know that there is some lung involvement. These are blood vessels going to and from the lung. So try and break down those big terms. So number 6 I've got is have some quick quips. Some little things whether it be mnemonics or just phrases, some set things that allow you to remember certain things. Now I've got a picture of the heart over on the right hand side at the bottom of the video. And over here, if I just draw a circle around this part here, the bit I've highlighted there is the tricuspid valve. So I'll just put a little T to represent that, tricuspid valve, because over on the right hand side here, that one, if I put the letter B, is the bicuspid. And one nice way that I used to remember the tricuspid valve being on the right side of the heart, because over here, this side is the right side and the other side is the left, because you can see it's got a thicker wall on the ventricle here. I always used to say, always try and be right. Try for tricuspid on the right hand side. Always try and be right. It's just a silly little phrase, but it really helped me remember the order of where things need to go, especially with labelling anatomical diagrams. 7, bullet point poster the long answer questions. So the ones that are worth 6 marks or over, they always have set responses. So for example, the generic immune response, what happens when you have a vaccine. If we think about maybe in Key Stage 4 some chemistry like the process of cracking or fractional distillation. I'm thinking maybe coordination of the heartbeat through SAN, sinoatrial node, and AVN, atrioventricular node. All these topics, they come up frequently and they have set answers. Try and just make a poster with just bullet points of all the things you can think about. Because if you can come up with 12 bullet points and just memorise them, usually in an exam you just have to remember 5 or 6 of them. But you've got it covered if you have that list. So do it by bullet points. It's far, far easier than trying to remember it as loads of different bits, especially for those particular questions. Number 8 is go beyond the spec. Now for certain examples this is crucial because certain examples require you to have an essay that's maybe got a bit of a synoptic component to it, so you have to go back everything, and sometimes there's a cap on the limit of marks you can get unless you go beyond the level of detail taught in the classroom. So I would say go beyond the spec, find something that can show off your higher level of knowledge, flesh out answers, really show the examiner that you know your stuff and you're not just trying to reach for an answer. Often when I've given students long answer questions to do, and you can see that they're almost kind of just trying to grab ideas out of thin air and put them down, and answers may read a bit waffly, and it's clear that they don't really have that understanding. But if you can go beyond the spec and properly flesh out the ideas, obviously with correct information, straight away you're giving the examiner that you know what you're talking about. And it will stand you in good stead, especially if they're umming and ahhing about giving you marks later on. They're more likely to credit you if they can see that level of knowledge is there. Know your limits time-wise. Now some may disagree with this. I personally advise this one. If there are topics that you just don't understand, you cannot get to grips with, you've spent a long time revising but you just find it too tricky, personally I would say leave them. Just focus on the other ones. Make sure you get the big topics down, the key ones, the ones that you know always come up, the ones that you can easily answer big questions on. There may very well be topics that no matter how many times you go over it, it just doesn't click, something doesn't click. Obviously seek assistance from teachers, from anyone else that could give you advice. But if it's getting nearer to the exam time, often people just get quite stressed with that, and they have to know that particular answer. But sometimes, if you're smart about it, you can just sacrifice maybe one little topic and focus your time on ones that you know will definitely come up. Again, number 4, I said skim over mark schemes. If you do that, you get to learn which questions they frequently ask about. So you'll be in a better position to know which topics to knock off if you do that one. And finally, learn the formula. I can't stress this one enough. Now, often in science exams, they give you the formula. They give you a lot of them. But I think if you learn them, it gives you a better understanding of what the question is asking, what variables in an equation to focus on. You'll be able to, you'll spot components of a formula in a particular question. So, for example, they'll give you some data, and if it's a Hardy-Weinberg equation, you'll be able to pull out, oh, that's that particular value, this is this particular value. And it gives you confidence as well that you know how to handle the data that you've been provided. And you're remembering the formula that you've been taught correctly, rather than just relying on one that's been provided for you, which you may have to manipulate, rearrange, derive something from. So if you can, always try and learn the formula. It just gives you a stronger position, and you feel like you truly understand the topic more because you know what you're trying to look for. So there's just 10 quick tips for, say, exam success. Obviously, some may work for you, some may not, but hopefully some of that will be useful, and you can try out maybe a few. So the few I definitely recommend are: look at your mark schemes. Think of the real-life context of everything. So no matter how strange the question may seem in an exam, you can at least relate it back to something that you can relate to. And maybe the first one, make connections between the topics, because then you can see the bigger picture. You can see where everything links in. Okay, hope all that helps.